Before we jump into modeling our first real part, let's just take a moment to familiarize ourselves with the Fusion 360 environment. So we'll start at the top. As you can see, we have this little grid icon here. This is our data panel. This is where our models are organized into different projects. For example, you can see if I click on my recent data, it's going to bring me to the most recent models that I've made. And I can drag these into my current model, or I can double click on them to open them up and continue working. We'll talk more about this a little later. We also have our file menu, our save icon, and our undo and redo buttons. Below that we have our toolbar. Our toolbar is where we're going to spend a lot of our time choosing different tools. So for example, you'll hear me say open up your sketch menu and select the line tool or the rectangle or circle tool. There's also other parts of the toolbars for manipulating our models, such as create, modify, and a whole bunch of different options. Below that we have our browser. There's not much in our browser right now because we haven't created anything. But for now, just note that you'll see these little light bulb icons that you can turn on and off. For example, I'll turn on my origin right now, and that'll show me my different planes. We will be working with a 3D environment, so you always have to be aware of what plane you're working with. On the top right, we have our view cube, and as you can see, I can move this around to change my view and orbit around. Or I can click this little home icon, and it takes me back to a home orientation. All the way on the bottom, we have our timeline. Our timeline is empty right now, but as we start modeling, you'll see it being populated with all our different sketches and different manipulations that we have made. Okay, now let's jump in and practice using some of these tools. So we'll start with just basically constructing a line. So we're going to go to Sketch, Create Sketch. And Fusion is going to prompt us to choose a plane. And you can see as I hover over the different planes, they will turn a lighter color, or they'll light up. So we have our XYZ plane, or our RGB, red, green, and blue. I like working with the XY plane when I'm sketching. So let's go ahead and select this one right here, the red-green plane. To create a line, I'm going to go to Sketch, Line. And something I want to establish right from the beginning is to get into the habit of just clicking and releasing. So now that as I move my mouse around, I'm not holding any buttons down, and I get this rubber band effect. You know, I mentioned that just to distinguish it from clicking, holding the button, and dragging. I think a lot of people are used to doing that. So just click, release the left mouse button, and now you can see that, you know, I can go ahead and start just creating lines. So I'm going to left click again, and I can keep clicking just to make just some basic shape. Go ahead and do the same thing. It doesn't matter what your shape looks like as long as it comes to a point. It looks something like this, and you get this shaded region. So we now have a profile. Whenever we enclose a sketch, we get this profile that's shaded in. That tells us that, okay, we can do something with this. We can extrude it. So go ahead and click Stop Sketch. Now this brings us into our 3D environment. So let's go ahead and click on Create, Extrude to extrude this up. So I'm going to go ahead and click inside that profile that I made, and I get this arrow. So I can drag this arrow up or down to go ahead and create a 3D shape. So yeah, let's go ahead and drag it up. It doesn't really matter. You know, don't worry about the dimensions right now. Just get it to look something like this. And click OK. Alright, so now that we have a 3D shape, let's talk a little bit about navigation. So if I click and hold down my scroll wheel button, I can pan. So it's like I'm grabbing this model and just moving it around the space. And very important to have a 3-wheel scroll mouse. You don't want to be working with a trackpad or just a mouse with a left and right click button. So with that scroll wheel, I can also move it forward or scroll forward to zoom in, or scroll backwards to zoom out. Yours might be the other way around. It depends. For example, either it might zoom in when you scroll out, or zoom out when you scroll in. But either way, you're moving the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And to orbit, we're going to hold down Shift and press the scroll wheel, and we can see that we can orbit our model around. And if we ever, for example, lose our model, that we're way out and we can't find it, we're wondering where it went, if you just double click your scroll wheel, that'll bring your model right back. Okay, that's really the important parts of navigating. If you're in a bind and you don't have that scroll wheel mouse with you right now, you can also use the little toolbar here on the bottom, which allows you to click orbit, and or pan to move around, and it has zoom options. You can also click on this little look at icon and select a face, and it'll turn it in so that you're viewing that face straight on. And again, we can just go back and click on the home icon of that view cube also to bring us to a home orientation. Okay, that's enough for navigation right now. So just practice orbiting and moving around. It takes a little bit getting used to, but eventually you'll get the hang of it. So let's now continue with our model. So I'm gonna orbit this so that I'm looking somewhat at the top, and let's create a cube on the top of our model. So I'm gonna go to Sketch, Rectangle, and I'm gonna select a 2-point rectangle. And it gives us the option to choose a plane again. As you can see, I can select one of those planes, or I also have the option to select a surface. So I can draw on any one of these surfaces on the extrusion we just made. I'm going to go ahead and choose the top. So you'll see it light up, and go ahead and click on it. And now I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to start drawing my rectangle. So to start drawing, just click once and then drag out, and click again for your endpoint. And now we have a rectangle. So let's go through that same process. We're going to click on Stop Sketch, Create, Extrude, click on the rectangle. I'm going to hold Shift and just change my orientation a little bit, and I'm going to drag my cube up. And that looks good, so I'm going to say OK. Alright, so now let's do one more sketch, and which will involve putting a hole through this second cube that we've made. So we will go to Sketch, Circle, we'll choose Center Diameter Circle, and I'm going to go ahead and choose this side. And as you can see, I'm facing that cube. Be careful, I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to choose Circle, Center Diameter Circle. In this case, it went ahead and lit up the side that I want, but if you wanted to choose something that's inside, sort of if you wanted that plane, you can click and hold down the mouse button, and you get a few options. So I can actually go in and select that plane. But what I want is that face. So I'm going to go just and click on that. Now I can go ahead and draw my circle by just picking a starting point and dragging out to set my diameter. Again, don't worry about the dimension, just pick something that looks something like this. Okay, now I have my circle in that face. So let's go ahead and also extrude this, but this time we're going to extrude it in instead of outwards. So we'll click on Create, Extrude, click in our circle, and as you can see, we can drag out and create this sphere that comes out, or the cylinder that comes out, or we can drag it in and you can see it starts turning red or pink. Also notice that when I drag it out, this option right here in our dialog box goes from join. Keep an eye on that. As I move it in, once it goes inside the circle or inside the cube, it changes to cut. So let's just drag this all the way till we see it come out on the other side. And I'm going to click OK. And now we have a hole going through our cube. Okay, there we go. That's our first model. It's not much. I don't know what you can do with this, but I basically just wanted to use this to be able to, just introduce some of the tools and briefly talk about, how to use them. In the next section, we'll create something that we can actually print, and we'll have some real world function.